Welcome to the meeting today, the live webinar. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today. And today we'll explore why supply chains have become increasingly complex and the challenges organizations face and the practical strategies that can transform complexity from a business burden to a competitive advantage. Yes, that's a fact. Organizations that manage the complexity properly, they actually have an edge over the competition. So before we begin, let's briefly introduce ourselves. I'm Aftab Khan. I've spent about more than 40 years in the industry, and I have worked for many corporations and performed many functions within supply chain management and work across global companies and borders. And with me, I have today with me Danish Mairaj. Danish, you want to speak for yourself?
Yeah, my name is Danish Mairaj. I am working in the medical device industry in the last 15 years in different roles, from engineering to quality and supply chain. Um, that's why I have a very holistic view of the complete supply chain, medical device development life cycle, including supply chain.
Thank you very much, Danish. Let's move on. So supply chains, as we know, are already complex. Based on their very nature, they involve vendors, manufacturers, distribution networks, and with all the variety of products that we use today, given that SKU proliferation and locations and third-party manufacturing, we're already dealing with a standard supply chain is already very, very complex. However, if you add further elements, environmental, and we see that we categorize them into 4 categories. What are those factors and how we can deal with that? Take an example of John Deere tractor manufacturing company in the US. They were already planning to move some of the location, start a new location in Mexico, but then the tariffs went up last year, and then that was totally new perspective on their cross-border costing strategy. Changing custom duties and tariffs changed the whole plan. But again, you have to be agile enough to restructure and relook at everything. And that's where the challenge of dealing with complexity comes around. And companies who are more agile, have robust processes to manage complexity, they are in the forefront. As a quick overview, as an example straight out of the Syscom training program, actually, it's a good example that I wanted to show to you. I'll stay focused on very simple factor. This is a very busy screen, but let's look at this. There are 2 manufacturers, A and B, and they're supplying to vast market over there, and they have vendors across the board. Now, being in competition, they buy their products from these 2 vendors, 3 and 4. They both go to the same vendor. Now, being competitors, their marketing strategies, marketing plans need to be very confidential, very secret, because if they're launching a new product, running a price promotion, seasonal activities, time to market, they all need to be very confidential. So this vendor number 3, which is common to both competitors, and then another vendor number 4, they also provide supply to both competitors. So now they need to have procedures, practices in place, regulations and internal regulations, I mean, to build a firewall of information so that things do not cross from one customer's information to another customer. For example, manufacturing schedule, recipes, packaging, promotional activities, the stickers that go on. You cannot have them mixed up. If they mixed up there, then they can be disaster. For example, you are packaging their product and mixing some of the elements for their product, and that can be an issue. So this vendor number 3 happens to have a mediocre, weak firewall. Things have happened in the past. There have been events, incidents. So, but this vendor number 4 has very robust firewall, very immaculate, and nothing has happened in the past year or years before that can cause any concern in the minds of the buyers or manufacturers. So who do you think will be a preferred vendor in the future coming years? This vendor 4 will obviously gain more mileage, have more orders coming in. They'll be more competitive, more successful based on their ability to manage complexity. And that's what we say when we say complexity is a part of business and doesn't have to be complicated. You have to have processes in place to manage complexity. So that's a good example of, in this environment, a company that can manage complexity better than others will be successful in the long run. So we have participants here. Please, if you have any question, you can jump right in or put in the text, or we will have a Q&A session towards the end. Like I said in the beginning, there are 4 categories of complexity. What are their sources? The 4 sources are the structural complexity, which comes from your infrastructure, like your supply chain landscape, your vendors, manufacturing sites, distributors, retailers, transport providers, third party, fourth party. So the more spread out that is, the more complex the supply chain becomes. Again, if you have the proper procedures, processes, robust planning systems to manage that, you can handle it. It's not an issue, it's not a threat. Supply chain drivers are your sites, your inventory, your systems. So, and they can become supply chain obstacles if you don't manage them properly. Then comes the operational complexity, processes, multi-stage processes. Think of when we talk about push processes and pull processes and the dividing borderline. Push processes from the start of manufacturing process right up to the differentiation stage where you finally make a decision which version of the product is going to become assemble to order, make to order, make to stock. So assemble to order, you stop at a pre-finished stage, and then from there you decide against the customer orders how to finish the final product based on where it's going. For example, you're packaging orange juices and orange juice or other fruit juices, and you bottle them without labeling, and then label them only when order comes in. So how many customers you are dealing with, what are the variety, that becomes your processing and testing and validation inspection strategy. Validation, again, your processes should be validated. Each time you change a process, any element of the process, if you are a regulated industry, for example, pharmaceuticals or other, you have to apply for the change and then get it approved before you can do a commercial run. So the change management in those areas can be very daunting depending on the nature of the change. That's where you see sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot how we include some very specific elements in our licensing. At the time of product development, if we have a specific catalog number that we used in the process, instead of generalizing it and making it generic, we add a brand name, for example, or vendor name or catalog number from a specific vendor. Now that is licensed now. Now, if you want to change, you have to go back and redo the license, submit a change control, and demonstrate that the change is okay, approval, and can pass. And instead of that, if you had a generic this definition or generic formula that you can switch from one vendor to vendor, that gives you more leeway, more flexibility, and does not tie you up with something that becomes more complex to deal with. Just an example. Product complex, extensive bill of materials, and product variants, engineering change, again, change control, and life cycle management. So bill of materials can be structured in such a way that you can combine the steps like sub-assemblies to make it not so deep that the MRP systems takes a long time to run, and there are a lot of SKUs we call SKU proliferation that causes more complexity in the master data. And master data management itself is a huge challenge. You can have the best system in the world, you can have best ERPs, best AI. However, if the master data is not accurate, is not maintained properly, then the entire process becomes questionable. So that's the third one, product complexity. And the environmental complexity, thing that you cannot control. The first three are pretty much under control. You can go back and do things better next time. There's an opportunity here. This is something that you just have to be able to uh, manage, define, defend, or handle as they're thrown at you as a company. Regulatory requirements, new regulatory, for example, you are an automobile manufacturer, and there is a change in emissions control requirement. It's something you cannot define yourself. You have to just be able to respond to it. Change the processes, change the specification, change the manufacturing requirements, change your vendors if they cannot supply. And geopolitical risks we see all the time. It's becoming more and more frequent. Every year there's something going on somewhere which causes a problem, issue with the supply, logistics, transportation, uh, sea routes, and those things. Trade restrictions, when companies decide that they need a trade barrier, they will either put customs barriers or put such requirements that's hard to manage. And sustainability mandates, very important. Uh, Governments, regulators want the corporations to be sustainable, their processes, their affluents, their emissions, and as they become tighter, it's very difficult to compete and be economical and get the product to the customer at the lowest possible cost. So those add to your cost. So these four categories of the other sources of complexity, how things become complex, and you have to deal with that. And the companies, those have robust processes, robust supply chain partners, vendors, they are better positioned to manage supply chain than the ones who don't who have internal processes. For example, sales and operational planning process. We had a discussion a couple of weeks ago on that. Sales and operational planning process is a central process in supply chain management. Companies who run a very good S&OP process, they have a mechanism to deal with changes, to deal with new challenges. But if you don't have a very well run and a smoothly running and robust supply processes, then you might have problems. Danish, you want to say something on this?
Yes, I want to jump in now. I think I was not audible. Can you?
Yeah.
So, just having my background in the medical device industry, um, I would like to add whatever Mr. Khan has just elaborated. Um, Medical device industry is one of the highly regulated industry in the world. That is the reason because it's regulated. It has something to do with human health. So you have actually in this industry a merger of different professions. You have clinicians, you have medical device experts, you have engineers, you have clinicians, you have different professions who are actually affected or related to this industry. That's why it is regulated in a different way. Um, we have the devices which are electromechanical, and nowadays we have digital companion devices which are also connected to our mobile devices. It has a complex technology, um, which is actually somehow also related to manufacturing of complex parts. Like if you think about the structural complexity, I am going to give you some example of a recent case, which is in which there is one company in Europe. It's called Nexperia, which is, however, one of the leading manufacturer of chips in Europe. It has been acquired by a Chinese company, and unfortunately, this acquisition was blocked by the Dutch government, and now we have a supply chain, I would say, supply chain nightmare in Europe as far as those chips are concerned. Same goes for medical device. I have been analyzing the supply chain of our electromechanical device, which was inhaler, a nebulizer. Um, so the time to market or the development time of of a medical device is relatively long. That has the downside that if you have a Bluetooth chip, for example, or an NFC chip, which is going to be used in the final device, the time the device is through the all the certification processes, the chip is already end of life. So so there are very much different challenges if you compare this with automotive or other industries, because those other industries are big, so they have much higher volume than the medical devices. They can actually make sure that their supply chain or their production um, is secure for the next 10 years until they align with the manufacturer of those semiconductors, for example, that they make sure that the chip will be supplied for the next 10 years or so. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is all the planning. So if there is some political issues going on, that is out of everyone's control. So we also mentioned that there are some regulatory issues or geopolitical issues that you cannot that out of the control of a manufacturer or the supplier. But on the other side, yeah, medical device is something which very special, in which you cannot move so fast as the automotive. That is one of the reason that it has an special place in the challenges, or the supply chain challenges are much more than the automotive. Similarly, the product complexity, I would say it's also uh, much higher, because you have a factor which called sterility. Many device parts or device components needs to be sterile. Um, I would quote one example, like we have an inhaler, and in this inhaler we have a specialized material which comes into contact with human body, or I would say mouth, or your inhaler, or you inhale the air which is coming through that component or this material. So this is a very specialized material. You cannot, for example, we had a struggle, for example, this material is manufactured or somewhere in America or Europe. I won't name the material. Uh, so unfortunately, our molding company is China at this time. It was a nightmare to supply this manufacturing material from US directly to China. So we always had to think about how to do this. I mean, political issues are always there, which are um, making the supply chain more complex. And product complexity is also there. I mean, we cannot have a component from the regulatory point of view, from the patient point of view, which is not safe for human use. So we had to have this material. So we are in a situation where we cannot have alternative suppliers. There are only a couple of suppliers for that specific material. The only option you have left, that you at the time of designing the equipment, or you look for the alternative materials, but with a comparable safety profile. So if you invest, for example, 100,000 euros for the biocompatibility testing, there are standards, there are specific standards which are completely different. So there are biocompatibility standards which are generic, and then you have biocompatibility standards which are very much specific to the inhalers. You have to be compliant to these standards. So either you get a novel material which is really available somewhere in Europe or somewhere in China, but then you have to invest upfront 100,000 euros to have the chemical composition or the safety of that material for human use. So I mean, you cannot get away with those costs. Either you invest upfront if you get a new material with a better supply chain, or you go for a material which is already proven for human use for a specific application, and you just go for it. At the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the manufacturer to have the respective biocompatibility testing. Either you give it by lab testing, in vivo, in vitro, or whatsoever. Um, so that is one of the reasons the development cost of a medical device is much higher than the standard products in the market, like in automotive, cars, and so on. They also, because they are well established, they don't have the requirements for human safety or patient safety. Um, yeah, we can
Yeah.
move
So
ahead.
I would like just to add in, Danish, if you will. So that's where the vendor partnership becomes very important. Vendors in those areas of manufacturing, like pharmaceuticals, like you mentioned, Danish, vendor contribution from the very beginning, at the very outset, at the stage of product development is critical. That's where you will see what vendors are available.
Yeah,
And so in the future, you're not stuck with one option because these are highly regulated industries, and any change will require a long drawn process to implement the change. So that's why vendor partnership from a supply chain perspective is critical at the very onset when you're doing product development. That's the time when you have to build the options into the license, so you have the ability to pick and choose between. Otherwise, you're stuck with one vendor, and then sometimes prices go up, and you can't do much about it because there is no option. If you do try to expand your vendor base, the first bottleneck is going back to change the license. And like you said, the cost of changing license element can be very high.
it can be very high. Yeah.
So let's move on to the next slide on this one. Again, your expertise, Danish.
Yeah. So, as far as the medical device manufacturing is concerned, you have a different set of standards, which are like we have a quality management standard, which is different from the automotive ISO 13485. We have different testing standards when you test a medical device. Like if it's an electromechanical device, you have 6061 series. If it's a mechanical, if it's then you have another transport testing. You need to make sure that if you ship a device, it really arrives at the patient's or the clinical site intact. You need to validate the packaging as well. So it's a bit different than the normal standard household products. So it should not happen that the device arrives at the customer, but it's not usable. Similarly, sterilization, that is the key point. We have been recently facing issues in the sterilization when we say, oh, we have sterilized it. It has sterilized, but this is not a standard sterilization for our product. If you do for the case ETO sterilization, you need to have a safety margin. Like you sterilize it, it should have degassed it before it moves to patients. The supplier cannot release it because the standard says you have to have these values. If they test it incorrectly, if it is in recently in one case we wait for 6 months to get it released because the ETO values were so high, and it could not be released for human use. So sterilization is not so simple. We think that it's very simple, but it's quite complicated. You need to think about the sterilization. You need to plan the best sterilization method for your product. You cannot heat it, for example, or if you can't heat it, if you cannot boil it at 100 plus degree, then you need alternative like ETO. But ETO has other downsides that you have because this gas is actually lethal or toxic to the patients. So if you sterilize with it, you need to make sure that it has degassed it before it reaches the patients. And for the release, you already know for the QP release, it's called the quality in the pharmaceutical world. You need to have very tight inspections. You cannot release something until the batch is compliant to all the standards according to the specifications. So you do the testing while you are developing the device, and in some cases you do 100% testing before you release the final product. In our case, it's getting even more complicated because we have a drug device combination in our scenario. That means that you bring the drug into the device and you do so you have a and we have in our case we have two worlds. We are like marrying two worlds. One is the medical device world and one is the pharmaceutical world, and you release a drug device combination product. It has a different world. I mean, it's differently regulated. um, Different standards are coming over, like we have a quality management ISO 13485 for a medical device, and then you have a standard for the pharmaceutical GMP standard. So it's getting even more complicated. So the crux of the story is that even the supply chain is not complex, but all that development life cycle of a medical device in this case is even more complex. That is the
And
reason.
and that translates into your manufacturing processes. And for example, after sterilization, when that stage is done, the packaging and maintaining the sterility, that is also a key challenge because, like just like cold chain, you do everything and you make the product, put in the cold chain system, and now if something breaks down the road, everything is lost and it goes to the trash can. So that's the key. If you don't pay attention to the processes that maintain those requirements, you are facing losses. Exactly.
Yeah, can move ahead.
We'll move on to the next slide, Danish.
Yeah.
There you go. Supply chain journey.
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
so yeah, take an example of a hypothetical device. Let's say it's in a respiratory drug delivery device. Um, we have different parts coming from different parts of the world, like different components. As I mentioned before, plastic molded components. Any medical device have plastic molded parts. It is made of mostly plastics, not always metal. Mix and match of different parts. So in terms of plastics, you have different type of plastics coming from different parts of the world. Some are very specific, some and each has a different requirement, each has different. So even if we think about the plastic components, it looks very simple, but the process itself to mold a medical device, like I can quote one example, practical example, where the operator somewhere sitting in one country, I won't name it here, um, is not capable enough to to maintain the manufacturing conditions for a specific plastic molded part. If you don't do it, it will have a coloration. It has the perfect material. It is everything perfect, but it will cause some decoloration because you are not or they were not able to manage those temperature, heating cycle, and all that parameter on the molding machine. And this causes so much frustration because you are not on site. You cannot actually say what's happening there. It's not always easy that you fly from one site to other site. For the cases where you have to investigate any problem, or any potential problem. Uh, and some highly specialized sensors or any electronic sensors, or like let's suppose in valves, or they are coming from another country, let's suppose in Taiwan or China or Switzerland. You have to rely on their COC. I mean, once you built a medical device, you need to have all the COCs or COA of all the manufacturers. You have to rely on those suppliers. So in most cases, you go there once in a year or every 2 years to audit them. It's a responsibility of every device manufacturer, but you cannot be sure that they are actually keeping track of all their processes in a way they should. Even if they are ISO 13485 certified, there are always some quality issues there. They have manufacturing issues. They have issues by their um, mm, by their suppliers. So what is really important for us in the medical devices that we need to keep track of all the suppliers in a way that any problem or a potential problem, we would be able to pinpoint it, and we will be able to go there. So in some cases, it's almost impossible. Like if the supplier somewhere is in China, it is almost impossible that you fly back and forth and look and investigate it. So that is one of the reason that we or other manufacturers in Europe, they are trying to bring, or they are trying to have the most suppliers within European boundary or at most USA, where you have an easy access to the partners and suppliers, and in the quality oversight. So probably there is one standards or one quality process. It's called MDSAP. So once you get this certification, you are more or less sure that you meet the regulatory requirement of Europe and US. So uh, the world is going through a sort of standardization, at least the Western world, where if you have a certification, quality certification of Europe or US, you are automatically qualified for America, and for the US, and for US, Canada, Europe, and Japan. So this program is quite, it's not very new, but it is supported by FDA. So this is actually making life easier. Recently, the 820 standard, or QSR 820, has been updated to have better alignment with ISO 13485. So we are moving towards more, I would say, standardization in this area as well, just like automotive. That automotive in the whole world is working in more or less in the same standards. So we are on track. I mean, I would say it's improving.
Exactly. And I would say that the existing what do you call MRA, mutual recognition agreements, they pave a way towards lowering the barriers, making processes more robust, more standardized across borders, and reducing the complexity in the supply chains overall. So yeah, that that initiative
Hopefully,
is happening.
yes, I would say.
I want to move ahead, Danish, the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, so as I already explained that you have different standards, so or different regulations. Like if you go for FDA, you have different pathways for the approval of the devices. So I just focus on the QSR. QSR is a set of requirements every medical device company has to fulfill. Similarly, in the MDR, medical device regulation, which actually imposes strict restrictions to medical device manufacturers, or the requirements, whosoever want to put a CE mark, I would say, on a medical device. So we have seen the CE mark on the medical devices with a number from and the CE mark is actually um, with a notified body number, is a sort of seal which says that this device has been approved by European Union. And all the notified bodies, like just like TUV Sud or others, they are competent enough. They work under the direction of European Union to give the CE mark sort of approval within Europe. So in most cases, if it's CE marked, is easy to get into the US or vice versa. Um, ISO 13485 is a standard which is specific to all the medical device manufacturers. Health Canada and MHR UK. Yeah, MHR UK is recent because it was part of EU and they were part of the EU until recently. So they did not require any other certification, but now they have to have like they made their life more complex now. So yeah. So what
So
we spoke about just that this ISO 13485 is going to be aligned with QSR compliance or vice versa. QSR compliance has been just updated this year. So in short, we will have more alignment with different standards and different countries.
no, I was just going to, sorry, I was going to add there that the traceability that you mentioned, Danish, is becoming so critical because of the counterfeit issue with drugs and devices, that you are going from not just by batch control, batch identification, but each unit of use that go to the patient, that is now serialized. And you
Mm,
can imagine the complexity maintaining millions and millions upon millions of numbers to be able to trace back. So if there's a report from the market of certain, not the batch number, because that batch goes with quality and other reporting regime, but if there's a complaint about a specific package, that also
mm,
can be traced to its batch. You can verify whether it is genuine or is it a fake or something. So serialization is such a huge and complex undertaking, and now you have to have very robust systems and processes to be able to manage that, implement that, manage that, and keep that working properly. Yep.
exactly. Yeah, what is really interesting here as well that in this case the role of ERP and digitalization we are going to speak now comes into play. Without having a professional system, I think traditionally in the pharma industry everything was paper based. So now we are growing, we are going more global, the products are going around the world. It is almost impossible to carry the papers with them. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
so you need to
Yes.
have the traceability, end-to-end
Absolutely.
traceability. So like, I have seen it myself, and it's our day-to-day job, that how we make it possible to have the traceability of a material which goes to into a medical device and goes to a patient. We should be able to trace the material used in the plastic parts manufacturing for a specific batch.
Exactly.
That means if
Right
you're
to the
going to do
very
this,
original material. Yeah.
yeah. And it gets even more complex if you have different contract manufacturers. Like one contract manufacturer has material from source one, the second has from source three, and someone else. So it's really challenging to have this. So in this case, we make sure that they follow the process. Whenever we need to investigate, they will have the record of that specific batch they have produced. So it is
Exactly.
almost impossible that we as a manufacturer, keep record of all the information centrally, but it is the responsibility of the suppliers or vendors who keep track of their traceability. Once we need to
Exactly.
investigate, we would be able to. It's irrelevant where the data is. Sometimes it's almost impossible. Like one of our suppliers, they don't provide all the traceability data. They said they can provide us whenever we want to give them.
Yeah.
That's
Central
more about
location.
IP. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more about IP. They don't
Accessibility.
want to release. Yeah, they won't allow us to access any data because they are one of the market
And
leader in their area. Yeah.
and that takes us right into the next topic, which is about how to counter the complexity issues. And one of them is the blockchain technology, where it makes data available when you need it. It's not, you have the right to access your own data, and that should be always the case. Shall I move to the next slide? I'd like to say something about. Is okay? We move to the next slide, Danish.
Yeah. We can move on. We can move on. Mm.
So in this area, as we can see, if you can't manage complexity, it becomes very costly for the corporation, becomes costly for the customer, and might impact the quality and service of the product itself. Complexity is there. It is a fact of life. Like Danish mentioned, there's so many factors, and we mentioned before that some are internal, we can do something about it. Some are external, we just have to face them and be able to manage them, handle them. And so internal processes, if they're robust, they have the strategy how to deal with them, then you are better off. You can be successful in the long run. So the focus is to find out the ways and means how to manage those. For example, these some of the recent challenges. Cost can be, you can have excess inventory. Inventory is a huge cost in supply chain because you're not sure which lesson is gonna change, which is going to be approved because so much complex licensing application process. You're maintaining inventory of the old material, and if the license is approved sooner, you end up with expired or older version of the products, so you have to throw it out. And it affects your poor service levels because your service levels, because they become poor because you are now dealing with too many SKUs, and your forecast has to manage many variants, and your supply lines, your schedule, your plant, they all have to deal with that. Logistical, everything like becomes very much spread out. And no matter how efficient ERP system you have, if the master data and the processes are not aligned, the result cannot be really very good.
So I
And the
would,
hidden cost
yeah,
that you don't see. Yeah, go ahead. Anybody has something to say?
yeah, I have something to say. So,
Yeah, please.
as you
Oh,
said
sorry,
about,
Danish.
yeah, no, it's all fine. So, as we know that some of the manufacturers, like I quote an example, automotive manufacturer, Dacia. So it's a European Romanian company. So if you see their product palette, they made it so they had three variants for a specific car. They reduced it to one. They merged the design in a way that you have one car, which even with seven seats, which is quite cost effective. I won't say quality is the best, but it's still the for the price you can get a seven-seater car where, but they have reduced the complexity. They have one out of three variants, different variants and different carrosseries. They reduce it to one because they wanted to reduce the price. Otherwise, it is almost impossible to be cost effective.
Mhm. Absolutely. Rationalization of the SKUs to combine the characteristics into one, and you may lose some specificity, but if you are reaching broader market, that's the way to go. Absolutely. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So it's
Yeah,
getting traction because once they have this combined, they merge three cars into one, three models into one model. That's
exactly.
really strange. Yeah,
Simplify your portfolio.
yeah,
So just this restrictions there before. We're still dealing with the restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz. It's opening up now. Hopefully it'll be normal, back to normal soon. COVID, we still remember the repercussions of COVID. They changed lives of many corporations for forever. Uh, so those things keep happening, and global efficiency, we are vulnerable to things that are happening elsewhere without out of our control. So our agility and resilience, which comes from process robustness, that's the key. Our strategy and response based on internal and external causes, that's the key that we can handle. So I would like to kind of uh, say a few words on the strategies and technologies to manage complexity, like Danish just mentioned about ERP systems. Yes, first of all, you also mentioned, Danish, about the simplification, simplify, reduce unnecessary product variants. You give a very good example of the vehicle that you merge three models into one, right? And streamline bill of materials. So the more common parts you have, the less proliferation of SKU numbers. So try to find standardized components. Only add those SKUs that differentiate the products from one from another. Under the hood, it can be the same as much as possible. And digitize your entire process. IoT sense ERP systems, ERP system connected to your vendors, like order placement, vendor owned managed inventory systems, IoT sensors where you use in manufacturing, digital twins, so to make the decision support systems like what if analysis, scenario basis. That's very important because you cannot play with ERP live systems, and blockchains for data transparency and accessibility and real-time visibility. Diversify sourcing. So right at the very outset, developing a product, you're selecting vendors. If you have diversity there, that helps you in the long run because you have more options. You can control costs. You can avoid disruptions. One vendor has an issue, you have and it's another one to go to. You don't have unique vendors and limited source supply. Standardization, as much as you can, use common processes and collaborate. Vendor partnerships, supplier partnerships are very important to avoid risks in the long term. And qualification programs. So if you have vendors and you have more flexibility built into the license, that gives you an option to source from different places, not just stuck and tied to a single source. And apply AI, of course. We apply AI in many processes within supply chain, beginning with demand forecasting, trending, and learning from the past events. That's very important. Predictive maintenance, TPM. So we look at the patterns. And sometimes product change also affects maintenance. So all those things, when we schedule, we see which products might require the specific maintenance step, so we are prepared ahead of time. Supplier risk monitoring, supplier base. So expand supplier base, which is every company's desire that we should have multiple vendors so we can source from. You're not tied to one or two, but the biggest stumbling block, the big bottleneck is your license restrictions. So if we go back to the point one, if you have license at the very outset, build licensed in such a way that you have options, you're not stuck over there. And quality production, if we change this element, that might change in the final product quality, like the Danish just mentioned, in sterility and packaging after that, what changed at the upstream processes that caused this change in the downstream. So that real-time AI helps a lot in that. So in the very beginning, I mentioned two vendors, two manufacturers, and then one of them was not able to just simply maintain a good firewall of information between two competitors. So that became a disadvantage for the vendor, and they might lose business in the long run. And the other vendor who had a very robust firewall, they managed information very strictly and keep the confidentiality in design, recipes, timing of campaigns, time to market, and all that. They will definitely be the preferred vendor. So managing complexity is and can become a competitive advantage for a company, because we know the complexity will be there. It is part of life. It is part of supply chain. Then we have to manage it. If you manage it well, that becomes your advantage.
Mhm. I can give you an example of one of our
Please.
contract manufacturing organization. So they manufacture our device, parts of our device, and they also manufacture one of our competitor. Like we know this, yeah. But more than that, we have no information because they have different teams. They have two different teams working on developing and manufacturing. So they have physically divided the team. So their project manager has nothing to do with our project manager. They are different teams sitting in different departments, different offices.
Exactly.
So
You just
additional,
cannot have that. Yeah,
yeah.
cross-contamination of information. That's very important.
So
And
you
there are
have,
regulations
when you
around
sit
it. Yes.
together, you have this information exchange. So they do their best to avoid this.
Yes. Because you might actually get into regulatory problem, because the regulators, if it is a product that is being licensed by two corporations, then you just cannot have that happening, because that might actually be treated as a breach of antitrust
Agreements.
law.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. Yep. So coming to the conclusive part of today's discussion, how do you transform complexity, which is part of life, into an advantage? Actually, turn it around. Faster innovation, short cycle times, project management. A good project management team and turn your dreams into reality at a faster pace. And some corporations have this as a budget requirement, as a KPI, as a benchmark, as a target for the senior level, topmost level. For example, there's a requirement by the corporate that such percentage of your sales should come from younger products. To state it differently, 20%, for example, of your revenue should come from products launched within the last 3 years. That itself, the simplest statement, becomes a huge challenge to keep your pipeline filled with new products. Not every product that's launched will be successful. That's kind of there's attrition. So that's where you need a faster innovation pipeline. Very important. So you can juggle around, you can change or keep your SKU fine-tuned to reduce complexity. Compliance, higher compliance ability. Your quality system, your documentation, your training, all that goes into it. Resilience-based, process-based. If you are processed as a culture-based, the company that pays attention and holds high importance training, documentation, and processes don't make shortcuts, they are more resilient because things don't go haywire when something unexpected happens. Sustainable growth is good for everyone. Every corporation that pays that uh, invests in sustainability have much better social picture, social profile, and have their preferred uh, treatment from regulators, and they have much better position to keep growing. And the key takeaway is complexity becomes an asset, not a burden, when managed with visibility, technology, and resilience. The organizations that manage complexity best will outperform those that merely endure it or maybe sometimes fail it. Uh, so that's the presentation for today. I would like to mention a few things about our training programs from BRASI that actually include complexity as a topic. In Syscom, we have complexity. I showed the slide that comes right from the Syscom training program. And every every course has a view and visibility for all these key traits of supply chain management. With that, I would like to say thank you again. Thank you so much for being with us. Actually, we are just on time, but still we will have the ability to answer any question that you might have, guys. So please feel free, unmute. Thank you for your thumbs up. Great. It's a pleasure to have you here. So every questions, please speak up. I'll try to see they have anything in the chat box.
Um,
Thanks,
good, mo-
Cindy. Yeah.
good morning, Aftab. This is Tawanda Overton Jones. I'm one of your new students. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm greatly enjoying the training that I'm going through. This has
Thank you.
been very in-depth, enlightening, and and presented all of the training in a fashion where you can really get into it and absorb it. And whereas not just where some people, some different places, trainings are just about selling their methodologies and their models. So this has really broadened my horizon and knowledge, and as it relates to supply chain. I wanted to ask you a question as the things that were talked about today and in today's training. What's the best way to ensure that you are doing some of these? Is it putting together a model plan that has different checkpoints to make sure that you're covering, because it's so much that you're covering all this, or do you suggest you have individual checkpoints for the different pieces? It's so much.
That's a great question, Tawana. First of all, I really thank you very much from my heart that you have such nice words from our training program. Really, it's coming from you, encouraging. Again, thank you very much for that. And thanks for your question. So complexity shows up in symptoms, right? Whenever you are kind of frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
why things are not working, why is it so difficult to get around, that's a sign that something is complicated and complex that needs to be resolved. And you're right, it's very difficult to put that in perspective, write about it so that people can see the challenge and can do something about it. And it can show up as inventory losses, can show up, and if you trace it back, you'll find that there's something that could be done better. The process can be simplified. So the mindset should be not to accept anything that doesn't make sense. Very common sense approach is the best approach. And culture
Mm-hmm.
at any level. For example, I'm sitting as a manager. I'm not the top of the company. I'm an operator. I'm a worker.
Mm-hmm.
If I take this issue to where it should be heard, like a senior management meeting or my group meeting, now the culture defines that feedback. Where does it go? Is it just put on a meeting minutes and then forget about it, or really take it seriously depending on the value? And
Mm-hmm.
it is turned into an improvement initiative or a project. That's why Yogan was here minutes ago. He's an expert on lean transformation of the corporations. So we say in lean, small improvements every day. Like that's the mantra of continuous improvement, CI. We don't wait for one fine morning that everything will be fine. No, we contribute and change things at our level. So each person in the organization has the ability to either make a change in their own process that they control. For example, I have a spreadsheet that's complicated, complex. I can go ask for help. Please train me. I want to make it better. And then remove that part of complexity, and all these building blocks come together and make it simpler. At a higher level, the leaders, the managers need to understand the cost of complexity to the business, to customer service, to profitability. So like it's vertical. So each one of us has a responsibility to make noise, make it heard, make ourselves heard when we see complexity. We think from a common sense perspective or training perspective that things can be done better. So put it on a piece of paper, put it on an email, discuss it, and get the ball rolling. Take the initiative and become the leader. You are the leader in your own sphere. Make sense?
All right. Yeah. Yes, sir. I'm trying to find the mute button. Makes a lot of sense, and I'm making some notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tawana. And thanks for coming over to this webinar. We do this regularly for students who take our courses and may want to learn more, expand their knowledge, and have some questions. So if you can't discuss those in a classroom, or if you're taking a self-paced course, this is an opportunity. Besides that button there, contact instructor, that's always there, but this is a huge opportunity to meet with other colleagues, hear from them, and and answer questions. So again, thank you so much, Wanda, for your input.
Oh, thank you. I look forward to dialing in regularly. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Anybody else, guys? Any questions, comments? I see our colleagues, our alumni here, Tareem, Saifarza, I think. So good to see you guys again. Thank you so much. We are a little bit over. I'm sorry about that. We'll start a little late, but there were some technical issues. Again, some complexity maybe in the process. We need to fix that. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar, happening, I believe, in mid of July. So please stay tuned, and we'd love to see you again. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye.
Thank you, Danish. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.